Stand tall, there's a higher road to take it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to whatever I decide to call this podcast. I've been encouraged by a number of people lately that I should be setting something up and basically just talking for an hour or a half hour or so, and we'll see how long this goes. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure how this will go. I'm able to sort of tell stories and different things from time to time, and we'll see if I'm able to do it here. So, actually tonight, or this morning, whenever you're listening to this, I want to tell you a story about a time, or the only time I've been to Peggy's Cove in Nova Scotia. And that was a time that I almost broke my foot. I didn't quite break my foot, but I will get there. So basically, I had spent New Year's Eve or New Year's with my girlfriend at the time, and we spent the evening together, had fun. Man, it was freaking cold. I don't know why we stayed outside and listened to the band as long as we did. Anyway, regardless, I was dressed warmly, but it was still cold, being December 31st and all. And then we, the next day, slept in a little bit and then decided to do some sightseeing in Nova Scotia. And I guess we decided on Peggy's Cove because it's the most iconic thing, or one of the most iconic things in Nova Scotia. So we decided to drive there, and it was early. We grabbed coffee, and then we got there, and even then, I had my drone, and it was something that I wanted to get drone footage of, but because it was so windy and on the coast, it was such a small drone, I didn't know if I'd be able to fly it. So I sort of gave up on that idea, and I ended up just sort of leaving that and then being disappointed. I took a couple of pictures, a couple of which that I've sold prints of, and maybe I'll put them on the screen here if you're watching the video feed of it. Maybe I'll forget to do so. Who knows? And anyway, we're sort of exploring around and looking at things, and there was a number of people there. And if you're at an iconic place and you want to take pictures, or you're a photographer and you want to get a picture of this place, you don't really want pictures of the place with people in it. So anyway, I tried to go where there weren't people, and then go as far away as possible down a place where normal people wouldn't go, to get a different perspective, because that's where you get the coolest pictures, is somewhere that has a different perspective. Anyway, got a couple of pictures, some stuff was cool, and then I started just hanging out near, not on, because everybody knows if you've been to the coast, if you've been to the ocean, you know you're not supposed to hang out on the black rocks. You can hang out near them, just don't touch the black rocks. And for those of you that don't know what that means, the black rocks are the slippery ones, so the ones that are wet, basically. And if you go on them, you aren't guaranteed that you will fall in and die, but usually the wet ones are the slipperiest ones, which means that you are going to, or there's a good possibility that you may fall in. Hopefully not, but anyway, don't go on the black rocks. So I was seeing the surf, getting some pictures up nice and close of the waves crashing over the rocks, and I decided that I was going to jump off one of these big boulders. I thought it was really cool, and I was wearing an orange jacket that we had got some other really cool pictures with. Just it contrasts really, really well. So I went and I climbed on this rock, and I didn't have a tripod with me, but I told my girlfriend to take the pictures. So I got her to grab the camera. I put it on high shutter mode, so it would take a bunch of pictures at once. When she pressed it, as long as it was in focus, things would look okay. So I made sure I was framed correctly, how I sort of wanted it. I gave her the camera, and I told her, have at it. Like, just, I'm going to jump. I'm going to be in the air, maybe even take some pictures beforehand, and it'll look super cool. So if you've seen the picture, you will know that the picture is absolutely cool. I'm doing like this big pose with my jacket, and I'm in the air above what seems like, or what looks like, above Peggy's Cove. However, anybody who's climbed trees, or anybody who's jumped off of anything, heck, if you've rock climbed, or if you've even like misstepped walking out your front door, you may know that feeling when you make impact with the ground. And if it's sort of spongy ground, it's not a big deal. But when it's hard ground, which it was, at Peggy's Cove. When it's hard ground, it's an entirely different story. So what happened was I was on this boulder that was about 20-ish feet in the air, and I jumped off of it. So I elevated myself a few feet probably, and I bent my knees. So in the picture, it looks like I'm about 5 feet above this 20-foot rock. So from 25 feet in the air, I came crashing down with my entire body weight, and I didn't land properly. I landed on my right foot. And when you land on your foot, or I landed on my heel, when you land on your heel, it hurts a lot. And what happened was it shot a ridiculous pain up my leg. And what happened was I disappeared because she was behind some other rocks giving sort of some depth. She was a little bit away. And when I jumped, I disappeared and then crumpled into a ball because I was blinded by pain. I was in relative shock, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But she couldn't see me. And then I just sort of laid there, and she called out. She's like, "Ben, are you there?" And all I could do and all I could muster, just sort of being in a relative state of shock, was to just sort of moan. Just like, And she couldn't hear that over the crashing weight, like rightfully so. I wasn't making a proper noise. So I just sort of laid there, and she rushed up to my side and asked me if I was okay. Which, I mean, I was, for all intents and purposes, I was okay. But it wasn't something that I thought was a big deal. I didn't think that I hadn't broken my leg. There was no blood. There was no bones out. But I was in a daze. I was in shock. So I got up and was just like, ugh, I felt nauseous, and just my body was all out of whack. And that was the time, and if you have seen this selfie that her and I took, that was the time where she decided it would be a perfect time for us to take a selfie together. Which, if you've ever been hurt, the last thing you want to do after having been hurt is take a selfie. Anyway, we took this picture, and I was still just completely glossed over. I couldn't feel anything other than this throbbing pain in my foot. All I wanted to do at that point, because this was the last thing we were doing for the day, the sun was setting, hence why we went there for pictures, and I was just I was done. Like, I wanted to go back to the car, and I just wanted the day to end so that I could go home and go to bed, quite frankly, because when you're sore and you're tired, and it was a long night the night before, and we had drank a little bit, so I was, let's be honest, a little bit hungover. And when that happens, you want to go to bed. You want at like 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. after the night prior of drinking, you're just ready for nothing, just to binge Netflix and pass out on the couch or whatever. Anyway, so after this selfie, not only did we not go home, we went to the gift shop. So she held me I limped over these rocks into the path and over to the gift shop, and she kept asking me if I was okay, and my answer was, kinda, I don't really know. Anyway, so we went to the gift shop, and I was just, she was trying to show me these t-shirts and these magnets and crap I don't care about, that I don't really need nor want to buy. My keepsake is always the picture and or the experience. So what we did was I limped over to the wall, or she helped me over to the wall while I was sort of hunched over her shoulder, and I told her, I was like, I'm just going to lean here. I'm just going to stay here for a little bit, and I'm going to enjoy this wall. There was no chairs, there was no bench for me to sit on, so I couldn't really take weight off the other foot, so I was trying to balance between my good foot, or now my good foot, and the ball of my other foot. And every time I'd put pressure on the ball of the foot, it would just send blood, and just nerves would just tingle up on the foot that I had hit. And I just couldn't stand there for very long, so I tried to hobble around, keep the blood flowing, so my other leg, my good leg, wouldn't fall asleep. So anyway, she finished up. She got done checking out her whatevers. I think she bought a keychain or something. I didn't really care. And then we got to the car, and she asked if I was okay to drive. Which, in normal circumstances, sure, I would be. And I think what ended up happening, I'm not entirely sure. I think what ended up happening was I did drive home just because I didn't want to sit in the back. I wanted something different to think about. I didn't want to have to think about how throbbing my foot was. I was still just in so much pain, and it hurt, and I limped to the car. She asked me if I wanted to drive. I said yes, and I drove the 4 or 5, however many hours home. Anyway, I was in school at the time as well, and it was something where I was in welding school, and I went to school for 3 or 4 days, just hobbling around, and it was then, or a few days later, that I was like, okay, maybe I should get this checked out. Should I get a boot put on in case there is a hairline fracture? I know it's not a big deal. It's not a big break. It's not like I crushed my foot or my leg. I was still walking on it. I was still fine. However, I wanted it to heal properly. I didn't want there to be like this ball or this bubble of calcification. I wanted it to heal right so I would be able to walk properly in the future. So I went to the hospital, and when you go to the ER with a 3-day-old break, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Which is, if you have a fresh break or a fresh suspected break or anything, I remember the time that I went with metal in my eye, again from welding school. Nobody cares. If you are especially in Moncton, because that's where I was going to school, if you're, Nobody cares about an injury from a few days ago. When you look fine, you're not writhing in pain. I mean, I was hobbling around. So I was low on the priority list. Anyway, my girlfriend, again, of the time, she took me to the hospital, and I sat there in the ER, and I could swear that the triage nurse laughed at me when I told her what I had done and explained it. I tried to think of a cool story, because the one I had didn't really seem like a cool story, especially at the time. And eventually, I think it was 8 hours or something, I just sat there in the ER bored. Of course, my phone died and I didn't have a charger, which is the absolute worst if you've ever been anywhere and you have your phone die and you've got wicked ADD and your brain just won't stop. It's even worse at the hospital because all you can hear is babies crying or people moaning, and you want that distraction. Anyway, there were magazines and stuff that I was able to look at, and eventually I got in. But then as anybody who's been to the hospital knows, that out of the triage room, out of the waiting room, doesn't mean a whole lot of anything. Because you just go into a smaller waiting room with fewer people. And now, post-COVID, you have to go in by yourself. So I, at the time, went in with my girlfriend, because it was a pre-COVID world, and we sat in this secondary waiting room. Because we didn't even have a room yet. So there was another guy, he was getting x-rayed for God knows what. And I sat in these, there were like 3 chairs outside of this guy's room. So once he was able to go, then we moved into that room. So this is like waiting room number 3. And I'm hobbling there. And at this point, I'm almost convinced that I don't need to be at the hospital. Like, I do not care. It will heal. It doesn't matter. At this point, it is for a point of curiosity to find out if my foot was actually broken. Heck, if it's healed, then who cares? But I don't want to have to, again, I don't want it to grow this calcification, this overgrowth on the bottom of my foot or the side of my foot and just make my life miserable for the next few years. So, having free healthcare, thank you, Canada, I was able to sit there and wait, although we have ridiculous wait times. Having Medicare, I was able to get the free care, relative free care. I guess you pay for it in your taxes. But anyway, I got the x-ray. The x-ray tech was very kind. Everybody at the hospital is generally very kind. Sometimes you get a little mean nurse, but anyway. The doctor told me that my foot was fine. Maybe a sprain. The muscles were probably hurt, but there was no break, at least that he could see on the x-ray. And that really started my trips to the hospital. Like, not all of my stories involve me going to the hospital, but there's a fair few of them that sort of end with me, like the time I got bit by the gopher, the time I got metal in my, like, there's certain times that just you end up going to the hospital, and it sucks. Yeah, it sucks when you have to go to the hospital, especially when you have to wait that long. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Ben telling stories, or again, I have no idea what I'm going to call this, but by the time it's posted, I hope I'll figure it out. Regardless, have a great day, a great evening, a great morning, depending on whenever you listen to this, and I will talk to you in the next episode.
I think I can feel you say dream.